Thank you very much, Lisa. And hi, everyone. I'm really excited to present today findings from our mixed method study on gamification in science. I apologize, first of all, the slides might be a little stretched there. This is because of a compatibility issue with the MacBook apparently and the projector in here, but only the slides will be stretched, not my presentation. I present this work on behalf of my co-authors, Sünje, Dallmeier-Tiessen, Paweł, Woźniak, and Albrecht, Schmidt. And the focus of this study was really on understanding if and how we can use and assign gamification to motivate good scientific practices. In this context, in particular regarding research reproducibility in high-energy physics. And research reproducibility is really a good example of a scientific practice that might profit from motivation. In recent years, we have seen an increasing number of reports pointing out that scientists often find it difficult to replicate or reproduce published work. And this so-called reproducibility crisis is leading to an increased amount of developments of technology that is aimed to support researchers in following reproducible research practices. And this is really important because reproducibility should be a cornerstone of science. Reproducibility is essential to verify findings, thus to validate scientific claims basically, to compare results to published previous findings, and to enable future work essentially. And at the very least, reproducibility requires scientists to thoroughly document their research, to share their resources, and to keep them accessible. And this is a bit what hinders reproducibility, because all those reproducible research practices, they require a lot of effort, and they are not matched often by a sort of reward structure. Often scientists find it more rewarding to start with novel research other than spending time kind of documenting and maintaining research archives. And this is where we thought gamification might make a change. So we tried to understand and see where gamification in scientific workplace and scientific environments is already used. And we realized that related work is mostly limited to what is called citizen science. And citizen science is all about understanding how to engage and motivate the general public to contribute to and to take part in scientific knowledge processes. And then, of course, we also looked at gamification in the workplace, for which there is obviously a lot of work already, a lot of related work. But we, in earlier work, we argued that the task complexity and the motivations of scientists and the scientific practice might be very different in this environment than in other workplaces. And there's actually a good indication that game design elements might work in science. For example, you can see on the bottom left the two badges there. They are what is called the Open Science badges from the Center for Open Science. And they have shown to, in fact, motivate and improve data sharing practices of submissions to a psychological science journal. And interestingly, on the right-hand side, you see an artifacts available badge. And I just note that actually, I think we are again in a different resolution, and this is not as stretched as before, but a little bit cutting on the right-hand side, but I think we will manage. And as I said initially, we were investigating and researching how to use gamification in the context of reproducible research in high-energy physics. And high-energy physics is a good environment to do so, because it is one of the most data-intensive scientific environments. And we were fortunate to have access to CERN, which is a key high-energy physics laboratory. Some of you might know CERN also because in the last 10 years especially, there were a lot of reports on the Large Hadron Collider, the LHC, which hosts 4 major detectors. They host some more, but 4 major detectors quite well known, called ALICE, ATLAS, CMS, and LHCb. And they represent some of the largest distributed collaborations in science today. And this special environment, data-intensive and large distributed, has led to high-energy physics to be very adaptive in new technologies and very innovative, as also the invention of the World Wide Web 30 years ago shows. And today, 30 years later, we were fortunate to have had access, or to still have access to, developments around the CERN Analysis Preservation Service. CERN Analysis Preservation maps the research workflows from those collaborations, from those 4 collaborations, to tailored templates on the preservation service, and thus supports researchers in documenting, preserving, and sharing their research. And we use this existing CERN Analysis Preservation Service as a starting point in imagining how preservation technology, gamified preservation technology, could look like. And having access to this environment and to this technology, we set out to answer 3 research questions. First, can gamification motivate scientists to follow reproducible research practices? Second, which game design elements work in science? And third, what special requirements need to be reflected in gamification design in science? And in order to answer those research questions, we conducted a series of research activities. First of all, we understood that in order to be successful, we needed to understand the research community very well and to understand their practices. So first, we reviewed high-energy physics research practices. Second, we conducted a quite in-depth interview study on research preservation practices, on perceptions also towards the preservation service. And we reported, as you can see, we reported the findings from this interview study in a KAI 2019 publication that we presented earlier today. Finally, as a last part of this process of understanding the community, we observed also one workshop. Before then, designing 2 very contrasting gamification versions that we, in the final step, evaluated. I will tell you about the last 2 activities in just a second. So again, a bit stretched, a bit cut off, but it should work more or less. Here you can see one version of the gamification designs called the simple game elements design. This one makes use of most common game elements, including badges, points, and leaderboards. You can see on the left-hand side we have the dashboard that has 2 leaderboards even, one for analysts and one for analyses. And on the right-hand side, the analysis page that shows for which activities scientists can get rewards, basically. And those really are inspired by the actual preservation service. However, they are imagining how such a gamified preservation service could look like, as does the other version, the rational informative design version. And here we use very different design elements. We use a graphical, a statistics overview here on the dashboard on the left-hand side, showing the preservation and documentation status of the collaboration, for example. And also in the center, the kind of activities that researchers do and also are done on analyses, basically giving visibility to researchers and to analyses. And on the right-hand side, also on the analysis page, basically informing about the kind of good practices rather than putting the competitive part in the foreground. We evaluated those 2 gamification versions with 10 high-energy physics researchers in 10 mixed method within subjects evaluation sessions. And as you can see on the right-hand side, we recruited participants with a very diverse set of experiences and roles, from PhD students to postdocs, senior researchers, one convener even who has a sort of project management view on analysis work, and even one professor. We asked the participants to explore the prototypes and to comment on them, and also to answer related questions that we prepared beforehand. And in total, we recorded 5.2 hours. We also asked them to respond to questionnaires that were designed to evaluate those 2 prototypes. And the results show that both versions are overall considered interesting, valuable, suitable, and persuasive. There are some differences. So, for example, you see in the suitability, the rational informative design version was judged more suitable. But overall, we can say that they are considered valuable, interesting, suitable, and persuasive. And based on the analysis of our qualitative data, we try to understand why that is, even though both prototypes are quite different in the way they try to communicate and the kind of mechanisms they implement. And also to understand further requirements for designing gamification in science. And we present those findings and implications here based on 3 sections. One called scientific challenges, the other breaking points, and I will afterwards talk about everything beyond achievements. So talking about the first section, findings and implications regarding scientific challenges. The core reason why people told us that they liked the approach, and while actually some of the participants were quite enthusiastic about it, is because they can increase their visibility. They see this as an opportunity to increase their visibility, and I mean, we all know that in science, this is something that is really essential in our career. And since this has such a dramatic impact, one constraint that we really have to care about is to allow for a fair reflection of achievements through the gamification layer on the service, and to make sure, as the senior researcher put it, to split the points for several people. Because if you give a big amount of points and only one person is allowed to push the button, this probably is a bit unfair. And this is also why several of the participants noted that they would rather promote teams or analyses rather than individual contributions. And finally, they told us to provide accessible goals, because sometimes research takes a long time, and for example in this case it can take 2, 3, maybe more years, and to provide sort of like a goal, show a goal that is very far in the future, can be rather discouraging, as participants stated. So we should probably split the goals into more accessible ones, and even possibly split the rewards. The second findings and implications section relates to breaking points. We should weigh the costs and benefits of controversial mechanisms. For example, participants here said quite often that leaderboards are quite controversial to them, that they might not like them, especially when it comes to leaderboards referring to analysts. But others instead very much did. So we should wait really in the target community that we design for, which ones we really want to implement and which ones might rather discourage people. And also consider, for example, frequency, which has turned up to be an interesting element. We have this badge, as you can see on the bottom center, 5th commit day. And an analyst said, well, I would not want to encourage like continuous streaks of days, because I really don't like encouraging people to work outside their working hours. Although, as he said, the 5th means just like the 5th day in general. I think that's fine. Also, there was a recurring statement concerning the promotion of achievements, but hiding discouraging information instead. And finally, to speak the scientist's language, which has been interesting. A scientist said, for example, I might be happy with gamification, but I don't want it to look like it. And she later said, for example, on the bottom right, you see the overview of the preservation status and the statistics. She really liked that because this is the language they're used to, and this is something that they find very acceptable, apparently. And the last findings and implications section relates to everything beyond achievements. And apparently, it is very interesting to see for them, to see the activities that are happening on the preservation service, in their collaboration especially. And apparently, this is especially important concerning the social comparison, which might be supported through the gamification service. As the researcher put it, saying, oh my God, my peers are preserving, I should probably do the same thing. And the gamification layer can apparently do even more, can acknowledge special uses. And I would like to refer you to the paper for more details on that, especially regarding administration and innovation. And I just quickly show you an excerpt from an example of teaching, where the gamification layer can really point towards good examples. As a professor said, there's a new way of doing it where things are more reproducible. And what we largely want to do is get signals to people of which ones are like doing it best practice way. and the gamification layer can provide such signals. In conclusion, gamification can motivate scientific practices. And even as we have seen, a wide range of game design elements seems to be suitable to researchers, even though we always have to reflect scientific challenges and breaking points in design. I'm going to upload these slides later on, make them available. And already now, as we can see even here on the projected slides, I think we have made available many of the study's resources in the ACM digital library. I would like to thank you very much for your attention and be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions? My, a bit shy.
So Martin Ranser, Linköping University. Did you have any pushback from when you were trying to recruit the scientists that were taking part, that they thought it was unprofessional or something like that?
That's a good question, thank you. No, actually, none of the participants that we recruited were basically canceling the sessions or anything like that. On the contrary, they were quite enthusiastic about this. So there was no one dropping out. It's not like the kind of results that we have are based on the fact that some would have dropped out. That was not the case. They were quite enthusiastic about it, actually.
Other questions? Because so I was wondering, at least in psychology, I know it's a bit a different research area, but we talk often about questionable research practices, and I wonder whether there might be questionable preservation practices, and whether perhaps some implementations of gamification might inadvertently encourage researchers to, just upload bits and bobs of their materials, kind of stretch it out, and
right. Yeah.
So what's your take on that, and are there ways to mitigate it, perhaps?
So thanks for this question. It's really nice. I think it's so I think there are two answers. So for the preservation itself, it's something that we really want to encourage, and I think any kind of preservation efforts are good to support. But then concerning the gamification, I think it's really challenging to see that some people might game the system, obviously. And especially concerning leaderboards that depict analysts, this might be very, very problematic. But having the kind of promotion of teams or analyses rather than analysts might already mitigate this, as we have seen in the study. And although there are always some concerns coming with it, I think the potential is far greater. But this is also why we did the study that way, why we did not, for example, implement in a productive system and then try to understand the perceptions, but really have this kind of mock-up and really get also very strong, possibly negative opinions on this. And this was really important for us to get. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We have time for one last question. Okay, then please give Sebastian a warm round of applause, please.
Thank you.